Hello, and welcome to the 12th episode of Let's Talk SADS Live Canada. I'm your host, Dr. Shubayan Sanitani, and I'm coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia, and delighted to be with you. It seems like just yesterday, I wasn't sure if I would be invited back for episode number 2, and here we are with a even dozen episodes, and very excited about what we have in store today. More on that in a moment. Um, this is a collaborative place to come together and learn from each other. I've learned a ton doing these sessions with very interesting guests from across Canada, and really focusing on SADS conditions, sudden arrhythmia death syndromes, and learning about the various conditions that have affected you, that affect your patients, and that we continue to learn and want to improve outcomes and have our families and patients really thrive. And so our purpose here really is to disseminate knowledge and collaborate with you in doing that. So a couple of things I'm very fond of is my little Canadian uh, content, and a quick reminder of some of the big names we've talked about in these episodes, and people are probably tired of me showing all these facts without explaining what's going on. So today, in keeping with Arrhythmogenic Right Ventricular Cardiomyopathy Month, ARVC month, which is coming to an end in a couple of days, our trivia question, our Canadian fact is, what is the main cause of arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy in Newfoundland? And I know a lot of you, especially those of you who tuned in last week for Dr. Cadrin Tourigny, know the answer to this. So I'll click right through. And this is transmembrane protein 43, or TMEM43, a protein which is very complex and present in all mammalian species. And the research goes on to understand how this causes arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, primarily found in Newfoundland through a founder population. So people for generations have had this arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy in their families. So why all these fun facts? So we're going to launch on December 1st, which is Friday, our SADS Trivia Challenge. So those of you loyal fans who have been watching these live or tuning in after work or in your spare time, you have been noticing that we talk about a Canadian fact each month, a couple of this month, and today will be our last one for the year. And we're going to test your knowledge. So here's the challenge, and this will be available on our website. Big shout out to Evan Kruger, who has been working on this and thankfully is more technically skilled than I am. So everybody can participate, and we're going to run the quiz from December 1st to the end of the year. And you can only enter once, so don't create multiple email addresses or anything to enter more. And you will have to answer three skill testing questions correctly. So I think there will be 5 questions. You have to get 3 of them right. And then you will be entered in a draw, which is for $200 as a gift card. And so obviously the first thing is you have to know what our trivia facts were, and then you'll get questions, and I'll just show you a question example. So who was our guest when we learned about George Mines? George Mines, of course, is one of the early founding fathers of electrophysiology in Canada. And I'm not going to tell you the answer here, but this is the kind of question that you'll be asked, and that will enter you into the draw. So after you answer the questions on the website, you then submit and then are entered in the draw if you get the right number correctly. And I don't know if you don't get the right number correctly, if you can try again. I don't think that's possible. So you get one shot at it. Evan will have the rules very clearly on the website. So I'm excited. Now, today is also Giving Tuesday. So it's this phenomenon that's grown over the last several years, where you start with Thanksgiving in America, and then you have suddenly Black Friday, and it continues to Giving Tuesday, where if you support most of your charitable causes, they can match or double your funds. And at SADS, we would very much appreciate your support. What are we going to do with your funds? Well, we're going to continue to host this webcast. We're also working towards having an in-person conference. We're hoping to do that as soon as next year. But also to continue to update our educational materials and provide the support that we do to patients and families affected by SADS. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's guest, Kristina Bangma. And shown here is her picture and her book. And I don't want to take away too much time in the introduction, because we're going to hear all about her story. I will point out, though, that she is our first patient on the show in our series for the patient experience, which I think is such an important part of our story and your story, and always so much learning from the healthcare perspective when we actually get to sit and talk to our patients. So let's please bring Kristina into the studio, and we will get her story from her as opposed to me. Kristina, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Shu. It is fabulous to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I will vouch for Kristina. While I have a fake background making me look like I'm actually in a studio that's tidy, she's very much in a real background where she actually leads some fitness work. So thank you for coming. You and I have had the privilege is mine to talk on a few occasions, and I'll confess that I even read your book, and so it's a great read.
Thank you.
And so more on that later. But take us back a little bit. How did you come to know that anything was going on with your heart?
Yeah, my journey started in 2015. I was racing, road racing, and I was doing a particular race up Cypress Mountain that I have done several times before, and I have ridden that mountain countless times. I can't even say how many times over the years. And so it was very unusual for me to feel faint and lightheaded and dizzy during this race, to a point where I actually had to get off my bike and lay down. And I'm not sure how long I was out for completely, but I lost about 4 minutes of time and got back on. The symptoms went away, got back on my bike, and then finished the race. And
let me just interrupt you there, because first of all, a lot of our viewers are completely unfamiliar with the concept of what riding up Cypress Mountain rapidly is. And as a reasonably fit person, I have never reached the top of Cypress Mountain. It's one of the local mountains that cyclists go up. It probably takes fast riders maybe 40 minutes
30
or
30 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. My time that I was trying to get was 40 minutes. The fastest people would finish around 30 minutes.
My goodness. And this is not a hill. This is a mountain that hosts winter sports and skiing, etc. So when she says, I had to lie on the road for 4 minutes, this is a serious endurance event. So please carry on. So you got up back on your bike and continued to ride.
Yeah, I got back on my bike. I just thought it was some weird, strange thing. I was actually kind of embarrassed because I am a cycling coach. And when you coach clients, it's often when people are first learning to ride, they go out too fast and they what we call bonking, where they just kind of blow up and they have nothing left. But this was, so I kind of figured that's maybe what I had done. And I continued to race and train throughout the summer, and these symptoms kept coming back more frequently to the point where I could actually predictably make them come about. And I would have to just lie down or wait it out, and it would go away within a couple of minutes. And I just thought it was some strange thing. Needless to say, I did not realize that I was going to VTAC every time I was doing that. And so when I did my 24-hour Holter, I could replicate the symptoms, handed it in, quite proud of myself, and thinking that they were going to fix whatever this problem was, thinking it was a temporary thing. And they immediately called me into the emergency room the next day, and the whole journey started from there. And it happened very quickly because I could replicate it quite easily on a stress test on a bike as well. They were able to see the arrhythmia quite simply, and then I moved on to getting medication and changing my lifestyle and moving on to getting an ICD.
Wow. So that's it's interesting you use the term lucky, and we often say that in on the medical side, where if we actually detect something, even though it's quite a scary abnormal thing that we found, we feel that we're lucky to have caught it. Yeah, because otherwise what often happens is people go for tests, and we don't get the answer, we don't see the abnormal rhythm, or we can't reproduce the symptoms, sort of like
Hmm.
the bringing your car to the mechanic and it just doesn't make that weird sound that you hear.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you were, quotes, lucky to have VTAC, and as our audience knows, VTAC, ventricular tachycardia, is a very abnormal, dangerous rhythm. Now, how did people figure out, though, and then give you the label of arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, or ARVC?
Yeah, that was a little bit gray for a while. I did have an MRI, and I have enhanced, enlarged right and left ventricle, but especially the right. And I don't have any scar tissue. I have a gene of unknown significance, so that was a little bit unclear. And it was really, really, there's no, I guess it's still a little bit in the gray area where it's so difficult to actually diagnose them with ARVC unless they have a specific gene. So multiple symptoms of being able to going into VTAC with a high heart rate. For me specifically, it only happens so far, knock on wood, when I'm really pushing myself hard and getting my heart rate up into those high levels. And then it has to be an emotional component as well. It had to be racing, high adrenaline, or angry or upset or something combined with the high heart rate. So for me, it was quite predictable. So I guess there is a chance that maybe it's something different, but what else it would be, I've been told that I would be treated the same anyway. Doing the medication I'm on, and I've been able to live a very full life, being managed, having my disease managed this way.
You've raised a lot of things I want to come back to. Something we talked about last week, and that I continue to emphasize, is that some of these conditions are hard to diagnose. So, even you have ventricular tachycardia, you have findings on your MRI, but people still leave some wiggle room, because arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy is a difficult diagnosis to make, and there are some mimickers. As we learned last week, there's often left ventricular involvement as well. So, and then we know about 40 to 50% won't have a genetic finding that is black and white, that really allows us to then trace this in other family members. It's a VUS, a variant of uncertain significance, which is quite common the broader one looks. So you're not alone in this, where you've had a challenging journey to get to the diagnosis, but it's great to hear that you have a diagnosis, you have a plan that is working. Now, the other thing that you talked about is you needed the combination of an emotional component to have these. So tell me a bit more about that, because I would think as a seasoned competitive athlete, you wouldn't still get pre-race jitters and things, but
Oh no, especially for cycling. Well, I don't know, for any sport, I guess, but For me, for cycling, I always got pre-race jitters. You're always nervous about your performance. When you're racing, you also know that you're going to put yourself in an immense amount of pain. So if you really want a podium or you want a place, it is going to hurt at some point in time, if not the entire time. For me, racing up Cyprus, I was planning on finishing in about 40 minutes. So you can race at your peak, almost your peak performance for a 40-minute. That's considered a short event in endurance racing for us, compared to a 6 hour, three, 4, 5, 6 hour bike race. So it's considered a short event. So it's going to hurt. You also have the potential of crashing. Going up Cypress Mountain, you're not going to crash going up a mountain, but if you're in a bike race, there is a potential of crashing with multiple bikes around you. So there's always that scare as well. So there's a lot of different components that you're nervous about. So when I'm racing, you always have that adrenaline and you have that rush. You also have that's why people love to race, because you get that rush, that feeling of endorphins and adrenaline just pumping through you. It's an exciting place to be. And to replicate that on a Holter monitor or in the studio, or in the lab, I had to get angry. I had to get upset because I didn't have that rush of adrenaline. So it was only when, they told me that my test was over that I got angry, and I said no, because I knew I could do more. I knew they hadn't really seen the full VTAC that I knew I could perform, which to be fair to me, I didn't understand it was really VTAC at that time. I didn't know what I was doing to myself. But I knew I could put myself into that state, and I really wanted them to see it so we could move forward with my treatment plan. So I had to have some sort of, anger component or frustration component if I wasn't in a race situation to bring it on. So when I did try to have an ablation, and it was impossible to replicate it, even with the adrenaline, because I wasn't emotional. So because you're partially awake, Dr. Laxman told me that it wasn't until he told me that it had basically failed, but they couldn't do anything, that I got angry. And once I got angry, then my adrenaline jumped up enough, and there was enough to actually replicate the arrhythmias again, and then they could try to ablate them. But he said, again, that was the only time. So me personally, I really needed that emotional component as well to bring it about.
Yeah, it is a real challenging disconnect, because we need people sometimes to be fully awake or angry or go to emotional places, but we also need them to be holding relatively still while we do their procedures or have leads on them. So it is tricky, and you wonder about whether we should have VR goggles on people and show them things. So
yeah, it'd be actually good.
Now, and I just want to sidebar here for a moment. The level of athletics that Kristina was doing, it was intense, and we don't want people to think that, well, only intense activity counts. We still want people with ARVC to be active, because if you have no activity, then climbing a flight of stairs becomes your Cypress Mountain. So it's all relative. So I'm awkwardly saying fitness is relative, and hang on to some. Now, what did people tell you initially about sports? Because there's quite a bit of information around sports potentially making your ARVC worse, or bringing it on at a younger age. What kind of advice, or maybe it was even sterner than advice? Maybe did people tell you to stop doing sports?
Yeah, it was pretty drastic. This is 2016 when I officially got diagnosis. So quite a few years ago. So things have changed. But when I went to figure out, okay, what level of activity could I do now? And they basically said nothing, like full stop, cold turkey, quit everything. I was allowed to do golf and lawn bowling, and I don't like either. And I don't consider, for an endurance athlete, that was not considered a sport. And I rebelled against it, because as a personal trainer, I couldn't see how living a life without any exercise was going to be healthy for me as well. So I did my own experimenting with sports and activities that were still good for my heart and made me feel good. And I basically did a self discovery method of, okay, I do something. Does my heart like it? Yes or no? And the next day, am I fatigued? Am I exhausted? Or do I feel energized? So I would try to pick things that made me feel energized and didn't take away my energy, because I do have a very active job. I train clients at a gym, and maybe I'm not working out with them, but I'm carrying their weights for them and bringing things back, and throwing balls, weighted balls to them. It's a very physical, active job. I was also coaching cycling, so I had to switch to an electric bike. But you're still pushing yourself. You're still working on an electric bike. It's not a free ride. It's not a scooter. So I had to be very aware of how much stress I was taking on the day. I also had a very active dog. So I used to not include walking the dog as exercise, but I started to log that down in my journal of, okay, that's an hour of power walking. That's counted as exercise now. So maybe that's all I do today. I walk the dog. Boom, done. Good. You got some cardio exercise in. Tomorrow we can work on mobility. Then the next day, maybe we can work on a little bit of strength training to try and get everything in. And it was really just listening to my body and seeing what I could do each day, each week. And then I also found that I had phases of the disease. So in the beginning was, a lot of exploration, and, getting used to the medication took a while. So there's things that I couldn't do in the beginning that I can do now. And so just always experimenting and always just listening to my body to, okay, what can we do now? What are we able to do? And being aware of when it's time to back off a little bit and when it's too much.
And thankfully, the healthcare profession is learning and is moving towards much more of a shared decision making, where exercise participation and is a conversation as opposed to an edict, thou shalt, and we're moving away from that. ARVC is probably one of the trickiest areas still, where there is still a lot of thou shalt, and I'm not confident. And so I'm delighted to hear that you set about figuring it out for yourself. And for the healthcare professionals out there listening, this is, patients are going to do what they're going to do. And so that 30 minutes in your office, that's not their lives. So a good reminder for all of us to really support them and say, well, how can we help you, thrive, with arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy as an example. And so now you're doing very very physical work, and really and learning as you go, and taking that into account. Now let me ask you, and I don't think I do you offer sort of do you cater to a clientele that then have health conditions because of your experience? Has this sort of helped your business, as it were?
Ironically, yes, it has. I feel that I've become a way better trainer because of the experience I've gone through. I have a greater empathy for people's individual conditions. If you don't have a chronic disease, everybody has something. And as I get older, my clients get older, so different things kind of creep up. And so instead of just looking at it as a personal training program, I do look at their entire life. And we try to incorporate a program that is going to enhance their life. And what do they need to be working on the most? And what stage are they in their lives? So what kind of exercises or what kind of types of, do they need cardiovascular program, or do they need more of a strength training program to help support them? So using the exercise as a support instead of something they have to do to add on to the end of the day, something else that's going to exhaust them. So I do get a lot of people with heart conditions as well coming to me. They are they're difficult, but they're the same as everybody else's. Everybody needs to be treated individually. You have to look at them and where they're at their stage in their life with their disease and also with their fitness, and start from there. And they get a little bit trickier because you do need to be checking in often, and they need to be very aware that just because I give them a training program, they may not be able to complete everything every month because things get in the way. if you have a busy work schedule or travel schedule, then that might throw things off just for a normal person who's not sick. But then if you have a disease, then sometimes that is one more thing you kind of need to take into account. Okay, well, you can't overstress the body with too many things at once. So I get a lot of people who now, as they're getting older, a lot of AFib type clients, and so I've learned a lot about other all the other arrhythmic issues as well. So it's become an interesting challenge, and for me, I just really want to keep people moving and keeping them active, because I think it is the key to a long life and a happy life.
Yeah. So AFib, atrial fibrillation, of course, it's not typically one of the SADS
It's not as
conditions,
sad,
but
no.
it does travel with some of them. So, we certainly see it more with, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and CPVT, other SADS conditions. So now, as having been in, having your identity as an athlete and as a competitive athlete, and then, you know, people give you this label, this diagnosis, and say, you can't do anything. You can do golf and lawn bowling. And how was that? Was there a sense of loss or grieving? How did that land?
It landed with a massive bang. It was devastating for me when I was told that I couldn't exercise anymore. I didn't know what to do with my life. I did think about selling my company, quitting personal training, maybe going back to school for something else. It was excruciating for that first year to go into the gym and try to be motivating to clients and inspire them to work hard at their training programs when I couldn't do everything they were doing. So I was very envious of the clients that I was training, and I had to step away from my cycling club for a year as I was trying to figure out how to manage the disease and how to get becoming accustomed to the medication. And so I was in a serious depression for quite some time. I went back to therapy, and I did a lot of meditation to try to reframe my view of the world, the view of myself, and my perspective of the disease. I was in a lot of self pity for a while. I was very angry, and so I needed to switch that, or wanted to switch that, into a point of gratitude and to try to see the positives of the situation. Okay, this is my reality now. How do I make the best of it? And what is that going to look like? So I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work with a therapist. I had a mentor that I talk about in my book that helped me as well, a business mentor and personal mentor. And then through the meditation and different philosophies, I was learning about way you can view life. I went from a point of self pity to a point of extreme gratitude for what I have.
Well, an amazing journey, and you're clearly, an extremely resilient individual. But to be able to use, to be saying, terms like devastating and excruciating and, severe depression, and still, continuing to struggle on. And one of the things we've definitely identified in our SADS communities is it's very hard to get support. And so one of the reasons that, the Canadian SADS Foundation exists is for exactly that. It's, one gets this diagnosis, this condition that most people haven't heard of, and where can you even talk to someone that understands? And so your lived experience is incredibly powerful. Now, at what point did you decide, I'm gonna write a book? What how did you make that decision?
When I was in the worst of my depression, I was looking for books. I was looking for what I assumed there would be tons out there of professional athletes when they quit their sport. What do they do? How do they change their identity from being a pro, whatever, to the next phase of their life? And I figured for them, there has to be some sort of transition period. And so I was looking for that type of book. And I wanted to figure out, how do you go from that depression period, or, okay, I'm an athlete, to whatever is next. And I couldn't find that. And so, although I hadn't gotten out and I hadn't figured it out for myself yet, I promised myself that once I figured it out, then I was going to write that book. And what I really wanted to write about was all that messy stuff, all the messy bits where you get from point A to point B, so that it would show a not a blueprint, because everybody has to find their own way, but maybe some ideas and some inspiration of there is some work involved and it does take time. It's not just an instantaneous thing. Because I was putting a lot of pressure on myself that, hey, you should be happy, you're alive, you should be grateful, you shouldn't be depressed. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get myself out of that depression, and realized that I really needed that time. I also wanted to, so that was kind of that I decided. And then as I started to figure these things out and started to come out and see the light at the end of the tunnel, I I wanted to make something positive of the situation. I wanted to create something that was really good. I didn't want to just, I wanted to have some purpose to being diagnosed with this disease. And writing a book and inspiring others and giving hope to others would be a really good purpose. So it feels like it's not all wasted in a way. It's a weird way, I guess, of thinking of it, but I wanted it to be to have value of something that I could offer. So I really wanted to give back. And then as I was writing it, it was a hugely cathartic experience. In the beginning, it was, I probably only used 2 sentences of that first draft because it was just purging out my anger and frustration. And then as I went back and started editing, I learned a lot about the disease itself that I didn't understand. And I also learned more about myself. So I could look back at myself and see it with some empathy and some understanding of, yeah, it was a really tough time. Of course you were feeling that way. You have every right to feel that way. And then there was a point where, okay, now you need to move forward. And so I was able to dissect that whole experience a little bit more and understand myself better through that whole experience.
I as I mentioned, I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
I'm not getting any money from promoting the book, but I think it's a great read, and it's very personal, and it sort of pulls you in, because one is reading and really feeling the ups and downs of your journey, and you shared very personal things, but it didn't feel like we were intruding somehow. So really, really congratulations. And I understand the book is available now on a little known bookseller, Amazon, and I think we might have a promotion in the new year that we're looking forward to, a partnership with SAD. So yeah, no, it's a great book. And then have you had some feedback? Have people come back to you having read the book and said, this, or I guess it's just out recently, but what kind of feedback have you had from it?
Yeah, I've had some fabulous feedback with people that are not necessarily athletes or even have a disease, and they were able to relate to the experience and able to get inspiration for it to move forward in something that they were struggling with or trying to get over something, and move to the next level. Some people who have diseases, they, particularly people that have ARVC, that have actually emailed me and said, "You've just written my story. This is exactly what I was feeling. Thank you for putting it out there, because I feel like my story is now heard." So that feels really good to hear that. And not just SADS diseases, but other chronic illnesses as well, where it doesn't matter what it is. Once your life has to change and you're forced to make a shift in your life, a shift in your identity, that there's that grieving period and then that growth period. And what you do in that growth period determines how the rest of your life is going to go, and whether you choose to be a victim, or you choose to take this opportunity and say, yeah, I can make something really good out of this, whatever it is, as much as you can. And everyone's got different issues, and that's harder for some than others depending on where you're at. But I've had some really great emails, really nice emails, kind of saying that, yeah, you kind of hit it, and I can relate. And it's also What I hear mostly is that, yeah, it pulls them in. And most people read it in one shot, in one day or 2 days. It's one of those things where I tried to make it interesting enough as a story that I wasn't preaching, that you want to kind of see where the story goes, where I go next. So each chapter is can be read individually, or it's continuation of my life.
Yeah. No, excellent. Maybe a stocking stuffer or a
Oh, that
seasonal
would be
gift for some
fabulous.
people. Now,
Yeah.
in our conversations, there were a couple of things that I wanted to circle back to. Um, and tying back to the theme, of course, in cycling and other competitive sports, one is always comparing oneself to other people and time goals. ARVC, you mentioned specifically, very important not to compare yourself to the others. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, from what I've understand about the disease, there's no, and I've met quite a few people with ARVC now. None of us are the same. We're all in different stages, and we're all at different levels of fitness and different jobs. So there's not I'd love to be able to put out a rule book. This is, you could do, these types of training programs, and because Christina's doing this, you should be able to do this. It doesn't work that way. And that's not just for ARVC, it's for any personal training program. If you go to a trainer and they give you a program that everybody else has, well, that's not personalized and it's not for you. So everybody is unique in what they're capable of and what you're capable of in that moment. So sometimes that changes each week. There's some weeks that yeah, I get on my bike and I don't feel good, and I don't feel like this is the right thing for me. And my heart doesn't like it. I'm tired or whatever. And then other weeks I get on and I feel like $1,000,000 and I'm climbing up the hills and feeling fantastic. So you do need to take into account where you're at in your life and in your fitness. And so to compare yourself, anybody in any part in life is not fair. It's not fair to yourself, and it becomes a frustrating game because it depends on who you compare yourself to. You want to compare yourself to pro athlete? Do you want to compare yourself to someone who does nothing? It's not, you really need to take your own fitness into account and listen to your own body. And if you really need to work with a professional who knows how to take your disease, specifically if you're speaking with SADS, you take that into consideration because it is a huge part of your training program and it can't be ignored.
Yeah, you've given me an idea to take up with our SADS executive, whether we, identify a few personal trainers that are, SADS certified, that are really knowledgeable. We might have just created more work for you than you were prepared. I
Yeah.
want to come back to something that we spoke about. You mentioned a real isolation, when you were first diagnosed, and part of that will come with the depression and isolation sort of commingle. Um, has that gotten better? Have you been able to come back to a sense of community? Um, I know that's a very personal question to ask you on live YouTube
Oh
here,
no.
but
No, not at all. I'm a pretty open book, and no pun intended. But I do write about that in my book. Is that because my entire life was revolved around exercise? Everything I did socially was exercise based as well. I did lose a lot of friendships, and I also felt sick a lot of the time. I was tired, I was exhausted, so I didn't have a lot of energy to give to anybody else. So I spent that first year pretty much alone, and I had a few select girlfriends who I would take for walks with me when I would had to take my dog out, and that was my joint therapy, workout for the day slash walk my dog. And so at that time, I just had a very small group of people that I kept close that I could confide in. And then as I moved forward and became healthier and got used to the idea, then yeah, I expanded my network. But in the book, I talk about that I didn't just go back to sports. I actually explored other avenues and other interests. I figured that I should have, or I would like to have, other things that keep me entertained and give me joy in life instead of just sport. And so I took up gardening, and I had a small community plot, and I went to an art class, and I went to yoga, half the yoga classes. And so I met all these other people within all these new realms, that they become a new social network that didn't require me to be an athlete, didn't require me to be a coach or a trainer. So I actually developed this whole other side of my personality that I didn't even know that I had before, which was really fun. And now I have all these competing interests that I'm constantly trying to juggle between. But it's a whole group of people that I would never have met before, and that's really exciting. So yeah, my friends have changed based on what I'm doing now. Before, my only social network was you had to ride a bike with me, or you had to run, or you'd have to do some sort of sport. And now I have other interests. So I have created a different community around me to help support my interests and support me moving forward in a healthy lifestyle.
Well, Kristina, you know, I think you're such an inspiration, and a couple of comments in the chat definitely agree. Um, real resilience and real insight, and certainly for our audience and our SADS families, I think a message of hope also. One that things do get better, can get better, and that one can be active and maintain fitness despite some healthcare providers putting a real damper on things. And so I think you are just an amazing an example of thriving with a SADS condition, which I'm stealing that term from Michael Ackerman, who
Yeah.
who uses that much more effectively than I do. But wonderful to have you here, and good luck with the book sales.
Thank you.
I think, as I say, I think you've done a great service to our SADS community with that, and we'll look forward to more chats. I can see you doing some personal training for us, or perhaps on a podium when we get that family conference organized.
Yeah,
So,
that would be
um,
fun.
so thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Well, that was a really inspiring talk for me to be part of, and as a healthcare provider, um, it's such a good reminder that we walk around as healthcare providers calling ourselves experts on condition A, B, or C, and really the experts are all of the people out there living with the condition. Um, I'm a pediatric specialist, so the parents, they are also always the experts on their child, and so a good reminder, and so nice to have a lived patient experience for us today. So I did mention that today's trivia was the last one, because next month we'll be full into the competition or the game, where you can win a prize. And our guest next month is one of my oldest friends in the SADS community, Dr. Susan Etheridge, and we're going to be talking about long QT syndrome. So until that time, and that's on December 12th. So until that time, take care. And I feel like everyone was probably inspired to get out and at least do some movement today, a power walk with the dog, or something more. So have a good day, and we'll see you next time.